So everybody, good news and bad news. The good news is I got my history job back. The bad news, I'm gonna have to lose this. It's been fun, but if the guys in the 46th Regiment couldn't have it, neither could I.
See, I am a historical interpreter at Old Fort Niagara, and I've interpreted the roles of French and Indian War, 46th of Foot British, Royal Artillery from the Revolution, and 1st U.S. Artillery from 1812.
But that's not why I'm making this video. I'm making this video to celebrate the beard, because today we're going to be talking about the 4th edition Warhammer Fantasy Dwarf models.
This is what I'm talking about right here. Very simple, very straightforward and exaggerated, but very fun looking. Much like the game it comes from, Warhammer Fantasy 4th edition. It was a pretty colorful game like most things in the early 90s, and the dwarves kind of stood out from the rest of the crowd as one of the most colorful factions. Look at them bashing glorious into the lines of... Oh no. Oh, I can't tell you how sad this is for me as a Goblins player.
So, am I a little bit conflicted about this? Absolutely I am. But it happened to be one of the miniatures that I was given, and it's from a point in time that I'm pretty familiar with.
You see, everything I've painted from Warhammer 40,000 2nd edition shares a timeline with these miniatures. They were all made in the early 90s, which is of course the era I realistically grew up in.
Another reason why I like this miniature and why I chose to paint this one today is because dwarves look an awful lot like little miniature Vikings. And I do have a soft spot for all things Nordic occasionally.
Just take this picture from my trip to Denmark. I was actually allowed to dress up in historical replica clothing, and I thought this looked pretty sweet on me. It's almost like the stuff that I do at work.
I'm going to be using a paint scheme that was inspired by, but not a direct copy of, a Viking, I guess you could call it, outfit that I saw while in the museum in Denmark. It's going to be very simple, so I'm not going to get too fancy with it. Let's face it, this is just a dwarf warrior, not a dwarf lord, and much like the dwarves, Viking warriors did not dress as fancy as their Viking lords, so we're going to keep this relatively toned down and simple. But I promise you, this is a quick and easy way to do a dwarf warrior from the 4th edition that still looks absolutely great and does your Nordic ancestors much justice.
So right off the bat, let's look at what we're dealing with here. I don't like the detail on this model because right at the base of the helmet there, the fabrics kind of blend together. I don't know what that's supposed to be. Is that supposed to be a cowl or part of the tunic that I'm painting right now? I guess I'll figure that out later once I take a reference look at it. But for right now, we're painting with a base coat of dark camel green. The next thing that I'm going to do is just kind of keep that going along all the fabric edges, both the pants and the tunic. Really, there shouldn't be much difference here. This guy's just a warrior. He must be pretty poor by dwarf standards. And look at that, his beard isn't even that long. So, we're just going to keep things real simple with him. The cowl should be a blue, dark blue, much like the dark green of his tunic. I don't want a whole lot of bright and flashy colors here. I don't care what those advertisements from the 90s tell you. I don't want this to be a Saturday morning cartoon thing. For the beard, I'm just going to be painting a layer of dust or khaki color down first, and then I will be covering that with a yellow ink later. And for the flesh, I'm just going to base it a dark pink. I know that might sound stupid and crazy having to shade up from a dark pink with a flesh tone, but trust me, I know what I'm doing. Maybe. To be honest, I'm just improvising as I go along. So the next thing I'm doing is getting all the wood and leather bits with that dark brown that I can brush up with later. Same way I did the wood and the leather on some of my previous models, making sure that the leather gets a little scuffed but not too bad, but the wood gets most of its grain brought out. This is the completed base layer right here. So not too bad, about table worthy if I reckon it myself, but it's not good enough for me. We're going to dry brush up on the green fabric with a light camo green, and that will really bring out the folds in the fabric and the detail around his pudgy little belly there. Once I've done with that, I can make sure that he gets the same kind of treatment on his backside. Those folds right above the chainmail deserve that same treatment. And then I can move on to the blue of the cowl. Now, I'm using a much lighter shade of blue to dry brush this, mostly due to sun bleaching. I mean, if this is on your back during the beating sun of a battle day, you'd look like that too. Now for the pink of the hands and face. It's looking more neon as we go along, and it still may sound stupid and crazy, but trust me, this will work for flesh shade. So once I've done addressing the flesh, I can go back to the beard. This is contrast paint, so for those of you not familiar, it's like a heavier ink. It sits around better in the cracks and crevices and actually tends to tint the surface it goes over a darker shade. See, now this looks less like hay and more like a blonde beard, if I do say so myself. Now what I'm going to be doing is laying down the base coat for the metal. So it's that Necron technique that I had right at the beginning of my video series. Nothing's changed, don't need to go into any more detail on it. Now I'm going to be doing some detail work. Taking a very fine brush, I'm just going to edge that bottom part of the tunic in bright yellow. Now, I know I said I'd be keeping this simple, but this is simple. Look at the ledge at the base of that tunic. It's basically perfectly cut away and perfectly revealed where I should be painting this yellow. And of course, if you mess up, you can always just go back with some dark green and cover it up in the majority of the tunic later. But that shouldn't even be necessary. It's that simple. Less simple, however, is going to be the highlights on the flesh. I'm actually starting with the flesh tones here, and you can see I have to hand highlight it. Ordinarily, I'd consider that a problem, but this dwarf's hands and face are so damn thick, it makes it easy to take out the detail on it. Good practice run, I have to do smaller humans later, I guess. So after a few dry brushes, namely a little bit of yellow over the beard, and a little bit of silver over the metal bits, I simply am going to highlight this axe blade a really bright silver. This isn't an orc model. It's not meant to look dirty, so I have to make sure that the edges look clean. And this little totem face on the axe blade itself needs to be brought out somehow, so I chose to do that with a little bit of burnished gold and copper. Now, I know that you probably aren't seeing the totem face here, but it's got a little nose, little eyes, little cheeks, and a little brow, and the blade is supposed to be the beard. I know that doesn't seem exactly apparent here, so once I finish the other side here, I'm going to go back into those little eye segments, and I'm going to highlight them in a lighter blue. This should bring out the eyes just fine, and give it the necessary impression of being an ancient, revered dwarf's face, at least stylized in their little unique style. Speaking of eyes, this is probably the hardest part of any humanoid model, the eyes. I don't know what it is, but I hate doing these things the most. It's not like my brush isn't cooperating with me. It's not like I'm fighting with the model. It's just the fact that I know that unlike on orcs, or on Tau, or on Eldar, or any other kind of model, after I lay that first layer of white down, I have to fight to get the pupils in the right position. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I'm just thankful that this time, it kinda did work. I mean, at least he looks more like Gimli and less like somebody who's gone completely cross-eyed. Last step in the model, it looks like. We're gonna just do a variation on the Necron painting technique, making that glyph on the back gold. Oh yeah, look at how shiny he is. Almost all done. So, now we go from having a dwarf model who looked like this to having a dwarf model that looked a lot more like this. You know what they say, you gotta appreciate the little things.
So I hope you guys enjoyed the painting of the great bearded little one, as I know that I've enjoyed having this for the moment, but you know what they say, history comes back around again, and in my case, like I said, they didn't have it, I can't have it. So thanks for celebrating the beard with me, guys. I'll see you all next time.